Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to see so many people jumping in on this discussion today. Welcome to the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities Self-Advocate Discussion Series. If you're new, I am Chris Hendricks, the Policy Education Coordinator for the Council. And this discussion series is a place for North Carolina self-advocates to gather and engage with each other and to talk about things that affect our lives as people experiencing life with IDD and other disabilities. We want this time together to be used to get to know each other and to get to know the council, where I and other individuals with IDD are leaders, colleagues, and we're valued for our input because we are who we are. People with disabilities should always be valued like that, and this discussion series will demonstrate why and how. Ladies and gentlemen, self-advocates and advocate champions, you asked for it, and here it is. On behalf of the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities, it is our joy to bring you Transportation Part 2. Last June, we had so many of you share your questions and experiences around transportation for people with IDD, but many questions were left unanswered, and some experiences were left unshared. I'll start things off with a brief reintroduction to paratransit and ADA regulations around transportation. Then we'll have our first guest, Dr. Ann Dickerson. We'll talk about transportation needs for persons with disabilities and a transportation checklist of sorts that's being developed. And then we'll get right into facilitated questions around transportation, where you get to share your transportation stories. After that, backed by popular demand, our transportation topic rock star, Kai Monast, is here to offer updates around transportation. Specifically, Kai is excited to share updates around the Mobility for Everyone Everywhere microtransit grant project. Just remember, we're here to listen, learn, and share. So don't worry about asking questions that someone asked last time. Lastly, before we wrap up, we will take a detour to talk about voting. For those of you who were here last month, we did the same, but it's going to be a slightly different topic, different focus this time around, rather. But first, we'll get things rolling here with our traditional jokes of the day. Philip Woodward, I hope you find them worthy, my friend. Keep in mind that the jokes follow today's theme, so feel free to share any answers in the chat. Here we go. What kind of vehicle does a skeleton drive? The answer is a Zamboni. I don't know why that one made me laugh, even though I wrote it. Next joke. I ordered a new auto part for you. Be patient, because it's Honda A. That, of course, being a reference to the car, a Honda vehicle, just in case you didn't catch that one. All right, now that we've got the cheesy smiles out of the way, let's get into our topic of conversation. Most days, we have tasks outside of the home that we need to do to take care of ourselves, fulfill our purpose, and let's face it, enjoy our lives. The Encyclopedia Britannica's simple definition of transportation is the movement of persons or goods from place to place and the various means by which this movement is accomplished, i.e. planes, trains, and automobiles. Also a hilarious movie if you haven't seen it. So, where do people with IDD fit in? If we don't have the means to get where we need to go, it can seriously impact our physical and mental health. And this applies to everyone, by the way. This discussion here today aims to get another step closer to a solution that fits everyone's personal situation. We may not get there today, but we can certainly head in the right direction. See what I did there? So then what exactly does the Americans with Disabilities Act say about transportation services? Here's a definition of paratransit services in plain language. Some public transportation agencies provide fixed route transportation, such as a bus or a train. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, says these agencies must provide an equal service to people with disabilities who are unable to ride a fixed route service like a bus or a train. This paratransit service will usually involve a vehicle picking up the person with a disability at home or close to their home and dropping them off at a specific destination. So now that we have been reintroduced to transportation and paratransportation as a concept, let's welcome our first advocacy speaker, Dr. Ann Dickerson. And first of all, thank you so very much for being here with us today. I'm going to introduce you by reading your bio here. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Ann Dickerson is a professor in East Carolina University, director of the Research for the Older Adult Driver Initiative. As an occupational therapist, psychologist, and driving rehabilitation specialist, Dr. Dickerson is an international leader in research in areas of older adults, driving rehabilitation driver simulation, and teens/young adult drivers with autism spectrum disorder. My goodness, that is a lot of experience. Ann was awarded ECU's 2018 Lifetime Achievement Award for Excellence in Research and Creative Activity for her scholarly achievements, and the 2020 North Carolina Governor's Award of Excellence for Service for her work in promoting driving and community mobility skills with teens and young adults with autism spectrum disorder. Ann will share her take on the transportation needs of persons with disabilities in the community, as well as news regarding a transportation checklist. Dr. Dickerson, that's quite a resume. I'm so glad that you even had a moment to share some of your time with us today, because it sounds like you're quite the busy individual. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. I am very excited to be here. You can hear me, right?
You can.
Yeah. I have been working in occupational therapy. I've been at ECU for 30 years, but I've been an occupational therapist for 40 to 45 years. And again, my research has generally been with older adults, but it's also been with individuals with disabilities or acquired disabilities. And as a driving specialist, one of the things that we want to do is get people who need adaptations to their vehicle so that they can be, and we all know people in the United States, we use driving as the main way of getting around. And especially when we think of North Carolina, it's very rural. So it's really an issue here. So we want to make sure people are safe, but we want to be able to maintain people on the road. And so I'm kind of talking about my research because that's working at the older age range. I'm checking for fitness to drive, but for you all, it's really about gaining community mobility skills, whether that be in driving. So the 1-week boot camp I do every year. So if any of you know of a teen or young adult that has the desire to drive, this might be something that they want to apply for. It's a free program. We've been doing it. This will be our 8th boot camp this summer. And it's been really successful. I have 5 or 6 students that help me with the program. And so that's one reason to share with you that's really open to the community anywhere in North Carolina and outside. I have someone that wants to come down from Washington, D.C. with her daughter. So what we do is evaluate each individual and then take the individuals that we feel we can really, that can address, that is the best potential to benefit from the program. But the main reason I'm here today is As I don't know how many of you know, I got a small grant from the council. And it is, as an occupational therapist, when we evaluate somebody, we kind of know their strengths and their challenges. And if we can look at those both physical, cognitive, visual strengths and challenges, we should be able to translate that to what kind of community mobility, both what's available and what they have the strengths that they could learn to use. So when that is my challenge. I have a student that worked at that has worked with his population, and she is really excited, and she's helping me. We expect that we'll have 3 different checklists. So the checklists where we have worked on the ASD one because that's where this idea came from, and I'm actually working with an international group. So that one would be focused on if they can't drive, what else can they, what other types of transportation can they use? The second one will be for those individuals with mobility devices, because that's another that's another area of barrier. So we will do this checklist, and looking through the checklist, the idea is, okay, here's their strengths and challenges. These are the kind of transportation options that are available. And for the, we believe that if somebody has the strengths and can be, you know, a mobility manager goes with them and teaches them, that person will then, the world will open. And then the third one will be with the intellectual disability. Again, those, I think that one has particularly a lot of potential. People can learn things. And we also need to educate the transportation world. We need to educate Uber drivers of how to deal with that kind of thing. So I'm open to questions, and I really hope members of this group will contact me, because I'm gonna need some experts to look at these checklists and give us the feedback, because we can't do it without your help.
Well, Dr. Dickerson, this is Chris. I certainly can't speak for everyone, but you've got 55 people here total, just soaking up all of this information. And let me just share how much we really appreciate it. It sounds to me like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the core of what you're sharing is that there's an inherent, frankly, a belief in ability is really where this all stems from, and we really need that. It's very powerful and very necessary. So I invite any of our guests today to definitely reach out to Anne. And I also want to just quickly mention, as a sidebar, I know that many of you may have challenges reading the chat, but we will take the time to read out significant chats. And with keeping that in mind, I'll just take a moment. If anyone has any questions for Anne now, feel free to share them in the chat. We've already got one requesting your contact info in the chat.
I put my it's really easy. It's dickerson@ecu.edu, and I put it in the chat.
Fantastic. And if anyone else has any other questions for Anne, we'll just take a moment. If you'd like to come off mute and ask your question, or you'd like to raise your hand, we'll take a moment now to ask that question. There will also be some time later on in our discussion today to ask those questions. If you, for whatever reason, don't think of one in this moment and want to ask yours a little later, and also feel free to put your questions in the chat.
Chris, this is Melissa. While we're waiting for folks to muster up the nerve to raise their hand or to put their question in chat. Earlier, when you first got started, Vicki Youngblood had written in chat that I wish my daughter could drive. The ART system in Raleigh is broken and they have made my daughter late to work many days out of 8. And I had to make the driver write an excuse to give to her boss. Nancy Johns wrote, I have found it difficult to use the paratransit system in my area in late evening or overnight. This is a barrier to work. Philip Woodward has responded and said that he's a member of the Raleigh's Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities, and they have demanded more accountability from the City of Raleigh Transportation Department to work to resolve the issues with the new transportation software that launched in August of last year. And Johnny Thomas wrote that he would like to talk with Ann Moore about these issues, and he is on both the state and local CFACs. So people are thanking you for your email, and we will save the chat and remind folks that this information will be included in a follow-up resource email after the session.
I do want to say I'm also on the North Carolina Highway Safety Program committee, and it meets as a task force, and I can take back some of this information to that highway safety program because the goal is to decrease crashes, and that really includes pedestrians and wheelchair users and going across crosswalks, that kind of thing. So information that you want to share with me, I'll make sure that I take that back.
Vicki Presley had asked you, does the boot camp assist with the actual written test if someone is having problems passing the driver's written testing for getting their license?
Absolutely. We you know, with the boot camp, we do hands-on learning. And, you know, so learning the test, if you learn it and actually in doing stuff, we have a simulator, we have a big board that we talk about, use Matchbox cars and say, okay, what do you do when you come to this stop sign? And have various activities. And so with this interactive hands-on learning, our participants live and learn the rules of the road. And so they do much better on the test. We had one young lady, she's actually went to community college, was a chef, but she kept failing the test and the on-road, and she came in and dealt with her anxiety. Many of our participants then leave the boot camp and get a license. Some of them don't, some of them learn how to take the bus. So we work on other things in addition to driving. But does that answer your question, I hope? So yeah, I think it would be a big benefit. We had one, I'll tell you one straight. We had one gentleman, he came down from Virginia. His grandmother heard about the program, and he also was graduated from college, and he was told by a driving instructor he will never be able to drive. And in fact, after the boot camp, he quickly got his license. So it's both the physical skills and the cognitive that we teach them and work with them.
That is, and this is Chris, that's awesome. And what a perfect finale story for now to end on. Dr. Dickerson, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you for sharing, and again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for allowing me to be here, and I look forward to emails and continued conversation.
Absolutely, and as yet another reminder, anyone who missed the contact info in the chat for whatever reason will be included in the resource email following this discussion. So I'll take care of that for you, or we'll take care of that for you, excuse me. And there'll be another opportunity to ask questions for Ann. But this is where we're going to change things up just a little bit. Since we ran out of opportunity to share stories last time, it's time for you, our self-advocate attendees, to please share your thoughts on transportation services for persons with IDD. If you'll direct your attention to the PowerPoint slide, you'll see an example of some of the discussion questions that you might consider answering. So I'll go over those real quick. Question 1, what does accessible transportation look like to you? Question 2, what do you think is missing from accessible transportation? Question 3, where do you want to travel and why? That's my favorite question. Lets me dream. Question 4, please share a story of successful transportation accommodation services that you've received in the past. I know that we experience as challenges oftentimes, but victories are just as important to share. So for all of our participants, for all of our audience members, this discussion does prioritize our self-advocates. So if you are a self-advocate and you have the courage to at this time, I encourage you to come off of camera or come on camera and come off mute if you're willing. Please raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand icon or raise your hand
Can't
physically.
find the Zoom.
Um,
Where's the, where is the Zoom thing, Chris? I can't find it.
The Zoom raised, well, even if you can't find the Zoom raised hand icon, you can unmute and ask your question that way. Do you have
Okay.
a question?
Well, this is Ellen Perry.
Hi, Ellen.
Hey, I have been talking about transportation for years, haven't I, Melissa? And I was on the transportation board in Carborough for years. And also I'm on Easy Rider Advisory Committee now. I am on it for life. So that's cool. The coolest thing that we've done in Carborough and Chapel Hill is gotten it free for people with disabilities and everybody. The buses are free, everything's free in Carborough and Chapel Hill. And you know how we did it? Do you want to know how we did it, Chris?
I do.
Okay,
We do.
we got it free because the town of Carborough, the town of Chapel Hill, and the university all went in together, and the students pay $50 per semester, and the town of Carborough pays 14%, I believe, and the town of Chapel Hill pays the rest of it. And that's the coolest thing in the town of Carborough and Chapel Hill that I've ever seen.
It certainly sounds really cool to me.
Yeah, so we need to talk to universities in Raleigh. We need to talk to we need to talk to ECU and everything else about it.
That's a positive transportation if I ever heard one, Ellen. Thank you for sharing.
And I was on the transportation board when this happened about 20 years ago. And it's been going on ever since. We won't let it go. And it was going to be $1 a time when they did it. So we said, nope, we cannot afford it. So the town's figured out a way.
Wow.
So y'all, so Raleigh needs to figure out a way. Charlotte needs to figure out a way. There's a whole lot of towns that can figure out the ways to do it. And Triangle Transit can figure out the way too to do it for free.
Chris, this is Melissa. I have known Ellen for my whole career here at the council, which has been a couple of decades. And I just want to say that it will be a great partnership. Our next presenter is Kai Monast. And so when Kai is completed, I want to make sure that we're able to connect Ellen with Kai. And I think Ellen will appreciate many of the things that Kai has to share. Before I go back on mute, I keep seeing Johnny Thomas raise his hand and take it down and raise his hand. Johnny, if you would please, we would love to hear from you. Go ahead.
I decided to start to put the stuff in the chat. One of the things that I've experienced here in Raleigh, North Carolina, is our transit system. It needs so much change. I think it needs to be more accommodating for people with disability, intellectual disability, and just regular disabilities. But even more, I think the drivers need to be better trained with empathy and compassion. You have other transportation that if you need to go to a medical appointment or something like that, I believe it's accessorized, that you can get through your LME or MCOs if you have the necessary information. So there are other avenues, but the point about that is they'll take you to an appointment, and then you have to maybe wait a couple of hours to get a ride back from the appointment. So it's not like you can go to multiple appointments back to back. It means that a person who's seeking medical treatment or who needs it has to have all that treatment under one roof, because they can't go to physical therapy at Wake Med and then go to another program to help them with another issue at another location, because unless there's a significant gap of a couple of hours in between, that's not going to happen. So the system, I think the biggest problem is there's not enough people. The people that are making decisions are not the people riding the buses. They are not the ones using these systems to get around. I mean, they might go out in the community and have an interview, but if you're not at the table when the policies and procedures and the decisions are made, then you're not getting what you're supposed to get. And that's what I really want to express. And maybe we can get something generated to get that change, because it has to be changed, because it's really depression. And it causes people not to seek the medical attention that they need to live a healthy lifestyle.
Johnny, this is Chris. You're absolutely right. We hear you. And I have heard similar stories from multiple people in our communities. So you're not alone in that. And the passion with which you speak says that you know you're not alone in that. But we hear you. That's what we're here for. And we're going to figure it out one discussion at a time. As has been shared in the chat, you make excellent points, Johnny. So thank you for sharing. Does anyone else have the courage to jump in, unmute, or raise your hand on the Zoom? Share your own transportation story. I saw, somebody popped up their hand and then they disappeared. Grant. Grant,
yes.
you got your hand up. Hi.
Well, this is Grant, and I have used public transportation before, and before COVID began, I signed up for Uber because Uber seems to be more convenient than the bus, because sometimes the bus will just take you will take longer if you're in a real hurry to get somewhere. And I hear people saying that they can't that they cannot go to any place because they were having trouble with access, who depend on access because of certain delays here. And that seems to be kind of a problem here. And I'm glad that I typed in I came up with the idea of tracking the access drivers down to where they are the way they can with Uber. Because when you track down a driver, you'll know where the driver is at. And that is because when you're tracking down a driver, it'll make life more easier.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more, Grant. I think that's brilliant. And to add to some of the things that you were sharing, in utilizing those rider services, it was shared in the chat. Nancy says sometimes Uber is just not economically feasible. And that's yet another challenge that we have to figure out how to overcome as a group. But I think that that's a brilliant idea, for sure. Tracking is essential. Janelle, you've got your hand up. Would you like to share?
Yes, I was wondering if there's ever been any discussion around making the wait time shorter as you're trying to figure this out from the state perspective, because every transportation I've been on, they give you like an hour and a half wait time or an hour and a half window of when you might be picked up, and that just doesn't seem realistic, especially when you're working. And I want to be competitive in employment, and it's hard to figure out transportation, especially with the when they just give you a 2-hour window. I'm in a rural area, Moore County, in the Sandhills area. And I was just wondering if there has been any discussions at the state level of different ideas to reduce the wait time. And I'd like to see something closer to Uber where you can be picked up in a few minutes. Just because I see technology in different ways that we already have available, but we don't have that available as with the system that's accessible now as people with disabilities. And so what discussions I'd like to see the discussions at the state level, how to reduce that wait time, and so that we can go to more than one appointment a day or stuff. Because sometimes it can take like half a day or more to get one thing done, and that's just not realistic to living in the community. Thank you.
You're quite right. And I just want to say that as you were sharing, our staff colleague, Philip Woodward, who's with us today, says in the chat, email any concerns to me at philip.c.woodward@dhhs.nc.gov. I know that's a mouthful, but we'll add that to the resource list. And not to put either of you on the spot, Ann or Kai, but I don't know if you've heard anything about wait times or know anything about decreasing wait times, or if there's been any discussion around that, but feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts.
Janelle, so there are a few things going on with Moore County. One is that Moore County will be getting additional federal funding to operate public transportation inside Southern Pines, Aberdeen, and Pinehurst areas. And that should will probably look like microtransit or a fixed route bus in those areas. We don't know yet, but the population of those three cities is now large enough to qualify it for federal funding. It's going to take a few years for everything to get into place. The other things that just to know is I'll be speaking about microtransit in a few minutes, and North Carolina is putting a lot of effort into microtransit, and it has exactly the goals that you need accomplished in it, where we're going to reduce the wait time, we're going to reduce the travel time, and enable people to make multiple journeys in a single day, and on demand, hopefully.
Okay, thank you for letting me know that.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Kai. Our transportation rock star is indeed going to jump in and share in a couple minutes. We've got time for one more question, and it looks like SP, you've got your hand up, your raised hand. You're muted, and I can't see your lovely face, but I see the hand raised. Would you like to share a question or a story for us?
Yes, I would. I thought you said some other name, sorry.
Oh, it's you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to know, where do we get to see the policies and the regulations that they've made concerning accessible transportation? Could you hear me?
You said, where do you get to see policies that
The
That have
policies
been-
and regulations that they've made for paratransit?
I believe, Philip, would you know the answer to that?
This is Philip Woodward here. I'm a system change manager for community living here at the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. The City of Raleigh Transportation Department has an ADA paratransit manual that's available on their website. So if you want to read the policies and recommendations, I can find that document and send it to anybody who is interested. But I also encourage you, if you're interested in policies and recommendations or regulations, come to a Raleigh Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities meeting on the third Thursday of every month from noon to 1 at the Pathways Building at 900 South Wilmington Street, or send me an email, and I put my email in the chat earlier. Thank you very much.
Philip, thank you for your brilliance, and I appreciate you tackling that question. I wish we had time for more shares and more questions.
Thank you on that, Philip and Chris. I just wanted to ask that it's not the application for the service, it's the policies that made the service become in existence and effective. Okay,
Understood.
thank you.
I'm ready.
I wish we could give us an infinite amount of time to continue with questions and shares, but we got to keep going here, and so welcome the return of our next guest speaker. Many of you may recognize him. He's just shared moments ago, but in June, Kai was one of our presenters on transportation. And today he's here to share an update on the Mobility for Everyone Everywhere microtransit grant project. And Kai will also share updates on transportation in general, as he already has. And so, for those of you who don't know him, Kai Monast is the Director of Public Transportation Group at the Institute for Transportation Research and Education at NC State University. Kai works closely with public transportation systems, the State Department of Transportation, and other industry stakeholders to provide training, assistance with technology, implementations, and advice for operational improvements, as well as conducting original research. He earned a doctorate in city and regional planning from UNC Chapel Hill with research focused on performance measurement for public transportation. Let's give a big self-advocacy welcome to Kai Monast. Welcome. Thanks for being back here today with us today, Kai.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. So yes, as Chris explained, I was just give you some updates on public transportation in North Carolina, but specifically I wanted to talk about MENC, the Mobility for Everyone Everywhere grant. But first, let me just tell you about microtransit. Microtransit looks like ADA paratransit in many ways, but it's small vehicles. But the difference between microtransit and ADA paratransit is the goal is that you do not have to book the trip 24 hours in advance, that you will be able to use your phone and request a trip to serve you almost immediately or maybe within an hour. So we call that same day on demand service. And it's based on mobile technology. So you can use an app on your phone, or you can use the telephone function to call and make a reservation that way. And microtransit does not have to follow all of the same regulations as ADA paratransit. So in some ways, it'll be a lot more efficient and effective if you're used to ADA paratransit, but in other ways, they might not, you might not be receiving door-to-door service, because normally microtransit is curb to curb, meaning you have to make your way to the curb and they'll pick you up there. Or in some cases, it's stop to stop, meaning that you would have to travel from your home to an intersection or a predefined stop and wait for the vehicle there. But it all depends. That microtransit looks very different in every community, and so all of those characteristics are subject to change depending on the community that's being implemented in. Next slide, please. So North Carolina is really a national leader when it comes to microtransit. This map has a lot going on, and that's because North Carolina has a lot going on with microtransit. You'll see that the dark blue stars and the dark blue areas are places where we currently have microtransit in the revenue phase. This is as of August of 2023. So revenue phase means that it's open for service and that you can actually book trips on this. The light blue stars in the light blue areas are counties and cities where we are currently planning on microtransit. And then the green counties and cities are areas that we're exploring the possibility of microtransit. So we have representation across almost all areas of the state so far. Next slide. So on the map that you just saw are the Mobility for Everyone Everywhere NC communities. There are 11 of them. And each community will pick the service solution that's most appropriate for them. It could look very different depending on a lot of factors, but primarily the number one factor is the community and what the community needs. So we have $10.4 million in federal funds to implement this. The limitation on the federal funds, though, is that it's for capital purchases only. So you can use it to buy a vehicle or you can use it to purchase software, but it's a lot more difficult to use it to actually pay for the driver and pay for the fuel to keep the wheels turning. Now, there is a way that we can pay for that operations using the federal funding, but you have to go through a third-party contract, meaning another company, not the public transportation provider in that area. So they would have to pay another company to bring in the drivers and the vehicles and operate the service. So some communities will go through that third-party contract, and some communities will be operating themselves. In order to make it easier for the transit and systems in the communities to make that decision. The state has also added $10 million of state money to this project. And that money will match the federal funds. So the federal funds require 20% of the money come from non-federal sources, and the state is putting up all the money for that. But the state money also includes funds to operate the microtransit, which is what was missing from the original grant. So we're very excited and thankful that the state has made it a priority to participate with a substantial amount of money in this. Next slide. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight the 11 communities. So I added yellow stars to the map so you can see what the 11 communities are. It's McDowell County, the city of Salisbury, the county of Rockingham County, sorry, Randolph and Montgomery counties, Alamance County, the city of Sanford, the 4-county region of Carts, which is Vance, Warren, Granville, and Franklin, the city of Wilson, and in Wake County, the northeastern part of Wake County, Rocky Mount, and Wilmington. And next slide, I'll tell you more about it. So where these projects stands is the federal government has already approved the projects, but we have to do a lot of paperwork. And so the paperwork has been submitted. We hope it will be approved in April. And once we get approval from the federal government, we will then start issuing requests for proposals, which is how we're going to award contracts to bring in the software, if that's all we need, or to bring in the third-party contractor, if that's what we need. So we can't spend any money until April, but once we get the approval, we'll start putting out the proposals. Then we'll evaluate and award the contracts, and then hopefully sometime starting this summer, July or August, we'll be able to start actually implementing the services, and your communities will have new mobility options available. Next slide. And I did just want to mention that microtransit is new, and it's very exciting, and it has a lot of wonderful applications. But right now, every microtransit project is still a pilot, which means that we don't have money to keep them going yet. We have not identified permanent funding. So they're still just in the test phase. We hope that there will be money to keep them permanent where it's working well, but we still don't know. And then where I work at NC State University, we have done some research on microtransit, and we're actually currently doing some new research that doesn't just look at whether it makes operational or financial sense to use microtransit, but it actually looks at the user experiences to understand how the services are being used, who's using the services, what's the transportation benefit to those people. And once we understand all that, it will help us guide our future investment decisions. Now I'm going to look at the chat, see if there's anything I need to address. And I think, Chris, we're going to open it for questions.
Well, Kai, it's been such a robust time with everyone today that we might have time for one question before we've got to move on. But is there going to be an opportunity for, will people be able to maybe email you with questions? Is that a possibility?
Yes, I put my email in before I started the presentation.
Excellent.
And
I'll add that email as a resource as well.
That's right. And I do see that Christina Ballman asks, are the 11 communities on the map the only ones that can submit an RFP? So Christina, these 11 communities are going to issue an RFP for the software vendors or the microtransit providers to respond to. And they are the only 11 communities in the state that can use this particular grant to fund microtransit, but there are other ways to fund microtransit.
Thank you so much, Kai. I wish we had more time for questions, and I know there's more questions in the chat that that need to be answered. And we will figure out a way to make that work. We really appreciate you coming today, man. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Once again, y'all, it is time for us to take our voting detour. Just as a reminder, 2024 represents a huge opportunity for self-advocates, not only nationally, but locally for our state and our community. Do you realize how powerful your vote really is? If persons with disabilities voted at the same rate as persons without disabilities, there would be 1.75 million more votes. This year, every vote counts, and your votes will determine party leadership for years of your life. Local leaders, board leadership positions, county commissioners, the governor, even the president of the United States. That's what we call impact, ladies and gentlemen. However, voters with disabilities continue to struggle with various aspects of voting, including some of the following: understanding our rights as a voter, understanding our candidates, understanding the voting process, and then there's the physical and logistical challenges of simply going to and using the voting polls themselves. If you'll take a look at the slide, it looks like a little bit of a Jeopardy board. And these are just some of the things to consider when focusing on the vote. We're not going to go over absolutely everything today. That's why we're doing these month by month. So this month's topic is about voter identification or voter ID. North Carolina now requires some form of proper identification when you go to the polls. If you want to vote first, let's look at a brief video about this new law, and then we'll take a moment to go over some acceptable forms of ID in North Carolina and a few facts about this new requirement.
Chris, I'm sorry, but I think we're going to have to skip the video.
Okay, no problem. I'll essentially go over some of the things that are shared in the video anyway. So here are some quick facts about voting in North Carolina. Voters are asked to show photo ID when voting. Number two, registered voters without a photo ID can now go to their county board of elections office to get a free ID. We're going to be sharing that link as a resource. Voters who vote by mail will need to include a photocopy of their ID inside the envelope. If they can't include a copy, they can complete an ID exception form and return it with the ballot. Photo ID is not required for military or overseas voters who use different voting procedures. Visit ncvoter.org/voter-ID for real-time updates. And I'll be sharing that, we'll be sharing that, as a resource as well. Now I'll just go over a list of acceptable IDs. North Carolina driver's license must not be expired or expired for 1 year or less. Non-driver's ID from the North Carolina Division of Motor Vehicles must not be expired or expired for 1 year or less. A U.S. passport or passport card must not be expired or expired for 1 year or less. Driver's license or non-driver ID from a state, Washington, D.C., or U.S. territory. This applies only if the voter registered in North Carolina within 90 days of the election, must not be expired or expired for 1 year or less. State or local government or charter school employee ID approved by the North Carolina School SBE, is that School Board Education? I'm not sure.
Chris, this is Pam. That's State Board of Elections.
State Board of Elections. My goodness. Thank you, Pam. Apologize for that.
Yeah.
College or university student ID approved by the North Carolina State Board of Elections, right underneath the last one. must not be expired or expired for 1 year or less. NC voter photo ID card. It's free and issued by a county board of elections. The voter must provide their name, date of birth, and the last 4 numbers of their social security number and have their photo taken. It must not be expired or only expired for 1 year or less. Also, a tribal enrollment card. It must be issued by a tribe recognized by North Carolina or federal government. Military or veteran ID card issued by the US government. And public assistance program ID card issued by North Carolina or the US government. What else do I need to know? The address on your ID does not matter to vote. The law says ID is only used to prove who you are, not where you live. Make sure your voter registration matches your current address. And a voter 65 or older may use an expired form of acceptable ID if the ID was unexpired on their 65th birthday. It's good for life. So I know that that is a mouthful. But as you can see on this slide, here are some of our voting resources. And again, it will be shared in a resources email following this discussion. Are you registered to vote? Check that link for the North Carolina State Board of Elections. Where to register to vote can also be found at the NC State Board of Elections. What are your rights as a voter in North Carolina with IDD? That's from Disability Rights North Carolina, that link there. Why should you vote? There's a powerful video for you that may inspire you. What's it like going to the polls to vote? We have another video link for you. What do I need to know about my voter ID in North Carolina? This is from Disability Rights North Carolina and includes a lot of the information that we just went over. The American Association of Persons with Disabilities Election Engagement Hub is a website with a lot of resources specifically for persons with disabilities. Check out the Sfera Blehavec 2023 North Carolina Voting Rights Handbook. Apologies if I butchered that name. And then one of my favorite resources introduced to me by my colleague Pam, who's also on the call with us today, Rev Up North Carolina. Their mission is to build the power of the disability vote. We have the link for you right there. Next slide, please. Thank you all so much for coming. I feel like we had to rush just a tiny bit, but we were able to squeeze in so much information. And it's just not as fun if you don't have so much information with a discussion like this. And I know lots of people needed to share some more. We'll offer another opportunity for that, I'm sure, in the future. Definitely check us out next month on Wednesday, March 20th from 1 to 2 p.m. for our next session. I just want to say thank you to everyone who made this possible behind the scenes. Thank you so much to staff. Thank you so much to our ASL interpreters. Thank you so much to our Spanish interpreters. Thank you, closed captioner. And thank you, of course, to all of our speakers, or to both of our speakers today, Kai Monast and Dr. Ann Dickerson. Thank you so very much. And thank you, self-advocates, for continuing to come, continuing to share who you are, ask your questions, share your stories, and just be yourselves. We hope you feel comfortable here. On behalf of the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities, as always, it's an honor and a privilege. We hope to see you next month. Thank you all so much.
Okay, have a nice day.